As a child, my dear friend Tay served food to the homeless once a week, loved Sunday school, starred in plays, won talent contests and a scholarship for gifted youth, skipped 2 grades, and excelled in sports. By early adulthood, he was at the top of a large gang, overseeing about 20,000 gang members, and operated what the FBI described as a multi state drug empire. He's now serving a life sentence. What is the reverse alchemy that turns a gifted, golden child into a violent criminal? What are the elements that turn him around and facilitate a successful transition from street life back to straight life?
By the age of 27, I had 13 bullets into my body. But at the age of 14, the violent world of the game looked like the safest place to be. There are three primary reasons that youth join a gang, and I joined for all three. But the first and maybe most compelling reason was safety. When you live in an environment where violence is commonplace and can erupt at any time, it's very alluring to have others around who can be depended on to always have your back. With the gang, we didn't have to face the streets alone. It felt like we were creating strength by joining together as a group. But I now know that by breaking into separate groups that opposed each other, we decreased our community's strength. At the time, though, we didn't see any other way to feel protected. Another reason that youth join gangs is that economically disadvantaged blacks, Hispanics, and even whites live in a world that treats us with disdain. To be in an environment where we are accepted and can feel pride in ourselves as individuals and as members of our ethnic group is like an oasis in the desert. Being around those that look at me like I was worth something when most of the world around me believed I was not made the organization special for me. The third reason that youth join gangs is the brotherhood, the sense of family, and working together towards a common mission. I joined the organization because I believe I can do something positive for the black community within the organization. People who don't know about the organization hear me say that, and they think my values are totally twisted. They see the violence of the gang and the havoc it wreaks on the community. And I don't deny that part is there, but the organization also did a lot of good in the community. Our primary cause was homelessness, and we held regular fundraising concerts where we enlisted comrades who were well-known rappers, musicians, and other prominent figures to talk and perform. And the money would go to support the homeless and others who were unfortunate. When they closed the boy clubs due to a lack of funding, we bought the building, hired local contractors as well as addicts and homeless to paint and fix the place up, bought sports equipment, and kept the boys club alive. A fair percentage of the money that we put into the community came from the illegal side of the gang, because it was easy to make big money from the illegal side. But the goal of the gang was to help its members transition into a legal life. We supported guys coming out of prison and provided them with housing, clothing, food, and any resources needed to get them back on their feet and make a better life for themselves. We helped those with talents get their start and expand their success into other ventures. In those days, the end game for the organization was to transition to the legal side. The organization also helped youth stay off drugs because except for marijuana, they weren't allowed to use drugs. Literacy classes were mandatory for members. So kids who had no motivation to learn to read right now had the motivation. We also taught leadership classes, African and African American history, Swahili, and lots of other classes. One of our mottos was, each one, teach one to reach one. Many of our guys didn't have more than a 4th grade education coming in, so each of us would take on one new comrade at a time. We helped them clean up their grammar and present themselves more respectfully. The goal wasn't that they assimilate into a white middle-class world, but to show themselves and others that they had something to offer. We let them know that no one was responsible for them going forward except themselves, and no one's responsible for holding them back except themselves. Most gangs today don't have that positive objectives of my organization that was so meaningful to me. But most offer the same basic elements that have attracted youth to gangs for decades. Safety in numbers, acceptance and respect, brotherhood and a way to feel valued.
There are many ways in which we as a society failed Tay and other men like him. But in our defense, men like Tay construct armor early on in life that normally includes what he calls an aura of violence. The result is that we are afraid of guys like Tay and want to cage them where they won't get to us, rather than help them. An example of this is the tattoo on Tay's chest that says, "White Girl Killer," a message he had permanently inked on his body at the age of 14. I'm certain this tattoo helped scare off more than a few helpers and limited the amount of compassion that came his way. Here's Tay's story behind the tattoo.
When I was a young teen in juvie, I had a counselor named Hilda Hawkins. a bona fide redneck. Blacks, Latinos, and even some of the white boys called her Hitler Hawkins. Every day this woman would find some reason to ridicule, embarrass, or simply harass me and point out that someone like me could never be anything better than a thug. I hated this woman and the opinion she represented. Because of that, I had this period where if you were a white woman, I hated you as well. And that's why I got the white girl killer tattoo. But I also knew that Hilda was the straw that broke the camel's back. By the time I was a young teen, I had already had my fill of wary looks from white women. Looks that said, is he going to do something to me? Or store clerks looking at me like I'm there to steal something. Or a white girl walking across the street to avoid passing me on the sidewalk. We black guys feel the wariness and distrust. The expectations that we're nothing but trouble. And it gets to us. It got to me. White girls represented the opinion of a world that would prefer the poor black boys like me weren't in it. It's hard to feel anything but hatred for that kind of opinion of you. But the truth is that I have never and would never knowingly hurt a woman or a child either. My commitment to that comes from experience. Until I was about 5, my life was pretty good. My mom was this warm and loving person that she is to this day, and always my biggest fan. My dad showed love by taking me fishing and including me in his hobby of raising pigeons. When I was about 5, Dad suddenly turned into a monster, and I learned from the experience that people could turn on you at any time without any notice. I have never been trusting of the world, and my lack of trust probably started with the time in my life. Starting at around the age of 7, I was the victim of sexual abuse at the hands of my father and a group of his friends. One member of this group was a female police lieutenant, which helped form my distrust of authority. My father justified the rape by telling me that he was preparing me for a world that would be even crueler to me. By the time my father got started on me, he had already been abusing my mother for a couple of years. I would hear flesh pounding flesh behind their closed doors at times. My mom would beg for him to just kill her and get it over with. I would cry because I felt completely helpless to do anything to help her. My father told me that if I told my mother or anyone about what he was doing to me, he would show me and my mom what real pain was. But even if my father hadn't threatened me, I still wouldn't have told anyone. In the streets, we were taught that to expose yourself as having been a victim of any circumstances was to expose a weakness that others would take advantage of. We never got the chance to take care of the pain that came with our trauma. Most of us got creative trying to hide that part of our lives. I know I did. I viewed everyone as my enemy and wouldn't allow anyone to get close to me. We all have our defense mechanisms, and mine was always violence or keeping an aura of violence around me. I understood that by pushing people away, I was not giving myself the opportunity to get to the core of what was going on with me, but I didn't feel like I had a choice. I held it all in and let it fester into something monstrous. I had a lot of emotions bottled up, but anger was the only emotion that was acceptable for a boy in my neighborhood. So I channeled all of it, grief, sadness, pain, and hopelessness, into anger. By the age of 12 or 13, I felt a hatred for the world so fierce and violent that it hurt to look into another person's eyes. I began acting out and was so totally lost and unyielding to my mother and everyone else that all they could do was pray for my soul. But it doesn't take that kind of pain to set a kid on the path of destruction. Growing up poor, surrounded by people who feel hopeless, who lack belief in themselves, who work too hard for too little, who battle with depression and addiction, and underneath it all, very low self-worth. Growing up in a community where brutality is just what it is. These things can take a serious toll on the kid, especially when he feels like there's no safe place to talk about it or doesn't know how to talk about it.
Tay was very close with his grandmother and saw her house as a God-given sanctuary from the brutality of his home. He would find as many excuses as possible to go there. At about the age of 8, he went to Grandma's house and learned that she had died. Her death came at a time when his father's abuse had gotten more horrific. The combination of the intensified abuse and having his one safe haven taken away from him caused Tay a crisis of faith that has spanned over 30 years. After Grandma's death, Tay viewed the world as a godless place, filled with only cruelty, and this worldview, I am certain, has fueled many of his destructive behaviors and decisions. As I've gotten to know Tay, I've identified what I think are other reasons for his joining the gang, and I think these reasons apply to many other kids too. By the time Tay was introduced to the gang at the age of 14, he was accustomed to leading roles and high achievement. The gang harnessed many of Tay's gifts and talents and allowed him a place to continue to shine and satisfy his natural drive toward leadership. The earliest childhood story Tay told me was about how the pastor at his grandma's church paid kids for each Bible verse that they memorized. Tay, with his amazing memory, would recite half a page of the Bible on any given Sunday, which surpassed the pastor's budget. Not long after shining in Sunday school, Tay sang in 2 talent contests and won first prize in both. He also excelled in any sport in which he participated and was asked to assistant coach Pee Wee football when he was still a kid himself. At the age of 9, he began his own drug business, and by the age of 13 purchased his first car in cash and taught himself to drive. Around the age of 13, he was skipped 2 grades and was one of 20 gifted youth chosen from the entire San Francisco metropolitan area for a computer program sponsored by Chevron Standard. He also starred in a school play. Tay says,
I had the biggest crush on my teacher, Miss Graham, and would do just about anything for her. She got me involved in theater, and I did a play in front of the entire school and their families called Mama by Paul Laurence Dunbar. I played the son, and one of my teacher's assistants played the mother. I got a standing ovation. Miss Graham's cousin was Alex Haley, the author of Roots. He came to see the show and told me I did a great job. That meant a lot to me.
By the time he left the gang, Tay oversaw close to 20,000 gang members and was being groomed to co-lead in the #1 position. He says,
When I first joined the organization, I promised myself that one day I was going to run the organization, and I came pretty close. The organization offered 2 different tracks, one legal, the other illegal. I chose the illegal track partly because I knew I could make a lot of money on that track. But more than that, it was because of the rush I felt out-strategizing everyone I was in competition with and staying one step ahead of the law.
the gang offered Tay not only a nice tall career ladder, but a way to satisfy and stretch his gifted brain. Tay illuminated another motivation for his choosing street life over straight life when he told this story.
Starting around the age of 9, I was mostly raised on my Aunt Gina's lap, while she hosted high-stakes poker games with pimps, prostitutes, drug dealers, and even members of the Oakland A's and Raiders sports teams. Aunt Gina called me a card boy or a good luck charm. I can earn up to $200 a night in tips in those games. That's a lot of candy money for a 9-year-old. At my own house, Mom was working hard and barely scraping by, and at my aunt's house, people were wearing nice clothes, driving nice cars, and the food was always plentiful. The life these guys was living looked exciting, whereas the majority of the people I knew who were living legally were working hard and struggling. I was too young to appreciate the deeper rewards that came with the honest, hard-working life, so that life didn't seem to have anything to offer me. I also didn't believe I belonged in an honest life. I bought into what people like Hitler Hawkins thought about me, that I was and would always be nothing more than a thug. Maybe a very successful thug, but still a thug. The illegal life seemed like the life I was born for.
As successful as Tay was by street standards, and with all the academic validation that he had through high school, Tay remains continuously surprised by any successes and achievements in legit life. For example, he's in his first semester of college and was floored when he earned an A+ on his first book report. When I asked him why he was so surprised, he said, "I don't know. I guess I still have a hard time believing that I can be a success in the legit life." This points to a strong need to show those like Tay how their skills and gifts can translate into success in the straight life, and also a need to reinforce their belief that there is not only good in them, but good that will positively impact the world. But let's get back to Tay's story and the elements that led to his gradual transition from street life to straight life.
After a while, the organization became more like the other street gangs, but I stayed because I had invested so much into it and was being promoted at a rapid pace. I knew it wouldn't be long until I would be at the top where I could make the changes that I and others had visualized. But there came a time when I realized that the new members weren't going to be interested in the kind of organization I wanted to create. I fell out of love with the organization into love with the woman who lived a legal life, and there was no going back. But the life I saw in front of me looked like a lot of loss and a lot of unknown. I had no idea how I was going to fit into it. Had I not met my wife, Laura, I may never have entertained the idea of leaving the gang and criminal life. Since childhood, everyone had preconceived notions about who I was. Laura didn't come with those stereotypes and patiently let me show her who I am. She helped me see the underlying good in me and the same underlying good in others. I fell in love with her intellect and sheer conky naivete. It was so fresh and appealing to me. I fell for her and I fell hard. I stripped myself of my previous life and everything that came with it to try to make an honest run of this relationship. We are truly the oddest couple on the planet. I've been an illegal magnet my entire life, and she has walked on the side of the law for hers. She is 20 years older than me and comes from money. We met 18 years ago and have been married 10 of those years. Apart from my grandmother, she is the nicest and gentlest person I have ever known. We have taught each other a great deal that I don't envision a life without her. But it's very painful at times because I have so little to offer her from my position in prison. I felt the one thing I can offer her was to try to be the best man that I could be, and to do that meant leading a life. My decision to leave the organization may not seem serious or important in your world, But for me, it was like a guy who started as a busboy at Burger King, then the cashier, then the cook, the manager, and then one day he's CEO. The organization was my Burger King. I rose through 8 levels of the organization and was 16 months away from being shared CEO of it when I left for the love of a woman and because some thought that it was the right thing to do. But it was very hard. At age 9, I began finding ways to make my own money, so financial independence has been important to me for a very long time. But the take-home pay from prison jobs after my restitution is paid is about 34 cents an hour. And so if I was going to go the legal route, I had to depend on my wife for money. I had never had to think about whether I could afford to buy something and couldn't do this on my wife's salary. This combined with hating being dependent on anyone made going back to my old ways very tempting. And for a time I did go back to my old ways. And I'm still repairing the damage made to my marriage because of this backslide. After leaving the gang, I was so filled with hatred about everything associated with myself. It was so low that I didn't want to be around. But I was too much of a coward to take my life the conventional ways. So I thought I'd destroy myself from the inside out with hard drugs, which I hadn't used since my experimentation as a young teen. I chose meth as my method of slow suicide. But lying to my wife and mother, 2 women who had never been anything but loving and kind to me, got to me. One day I realized that I didn't like the person that I had become, and I never touched meth again after that day. I also lost the friendship of my comrades. Some of them looked down on my decision, and some wished that they had the courage to do what I was doing. But regardless of their viewpoint, I had broken my vow to be part of the brotherhood for life, and that made me an outcast with guys who had been in my life for decades. At the same time, I was moved to an S&Y yard which protect gang defectors from the wrath of gangs that they left. But S&Y yards were originally created to protect child molesters and homosexuals from the hostility of the general population. So I was now in the company of child molesters, which was uncomfortable for me and would blow to my pride. I was also in the company of organization snitchers and defectors. As an organization leader, I had come down hard on these individuals, and now here I was living with them. But as hard as it was for me, it's even harder on others who leave gangs because in order to get the protection of an S&Y yard, prisoners require former gang members to give insider information on their gangs. I got lucky and was able to use the situation with the prison guards to my benefit and get into S&Y yard without having to give up any information. Because of this, I was able to maintain some dignity when I left. Most guys who leave gangs lose everything that I lost and their dignity too, and there's a lot of grief in that.
When a member of the Dagara tribe of West Africa breaks the rules, the consequence is that the entire tribe encircles the man, tells him what they appreciate about him, and then sing him a song written just for him that was assigned to him before his birth. The goal of this ritual is to remind the man who he really is, of his gifts, innate goodness, and purpose in this world. The repeat offender rate in the Dagara tribe is close to 0%, while here in the U.S. it is between 43 and 78%. Tay thinks along the same lines as the Dagara tribe. He says,
We got to give these guys something very bright to move toward. They have to believe in themselves, believe that there's good inside of them, believe that it's possible for them to create a life on the legal side that is happy, and most of all, they must believe that they are worthy of having a life that they can feel proud of. I realized that my happiest moments before and even during the life was not the big moments, but the unmemorable ones, like riding my motorcycle, fishing, hitting the road with no destination in mind, or my routine of eating lunch at a Chinese restaurant and then going to a movie. Street life offers excitement, money, and power, but in all my success, I never felt fulfilled, at peace, or truly happy. I was always on the run, looking over my shoulder and on guard. And as I got more successful and rose higher in organizations, the demands on me got more intense until my life was no longer my own. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I had no time to enjoy the fruits of the life. As hard as it was to leave, there came a day when I didn't have to run anymore. I didn't have to put out fires or respond to dozens of organizational issues or take care of loose cannons. There came a day when I could take a deep breath and relax. I felt peace for the first time since I was a little boy, and this gave me hope for what the straight life could be for me. I also came to the realization that I had defeated the odds by still being alive at 42. And I wanted to use the time I had left to finally do something that I could feel truly proud of. What helped me more than anything to move into the straight life was the people who believed in me, who saw the good in me and believed that I could be a positive force in this world. They made me believe it too.